The transition from the unreality of the warp was, as always, a brutal symphony of screaming alarms and the tortured groans of the inquisitorial black ship Martyr's Lament. Bulkheads shuddered with the strain, the ancient adamantium plates complaining like the bones of a dying behemoth, and the air on the command bridge thrummed with a discordant energy that set teeth on edge and frayed already taut nerves. The ship's machine spirit, a cantankerous entity that had served the Ordos for longer than any living soul aboard, seemed to keen in protest as the laws of physics reasserted themselves with jarring finality. Through the primary viewport, a vast expanse of adamantine-laced plasteel that had stared unblinking into the abyss of countless void terrors, and borne witness to the silent, screaming deaths of stars, the Sable Drift did not so much appear as coalesce out of the impossible geometries of the immaterium. It was not a drift in the conventional sense of scattered debris from some ancient stellar catastrophe, but a vast, swirling morass of cosmic dust so fine it seemed almost liquid, interspersed with jagged, obsidian-like asteroids that tumbled in slow, chaotic orbits like chips of a shattered god's despair. The entire region was bathed in an eerie, perpetual twilight, the light of distant stars choked and diffused by the particulate miasma, giving everything a bruised, unhealthy hue of sickly purples and dead grays. It looked less like a sector of space and more like a festering wound in the fabric of the void, a place where reality itself felt thin and diseased, where the veil between what is and what should not be was perilously frayed. My name is Inquisitor Silas Marr, an agent of the Ordo Hereticus, though some whisper in the shadowed underdecks of Imperial cruisers and the gilded, hypocritical halls of Sector Command that my methods lean closer to the Ordo Malleus when necessity dictates. And in the 41st millennium, necessity is a constant, ravenous companion, its hunger never sated, its demands ever more extreme. My current charge, delivered via a heavily encrypted astropathic missive that had cost the sanity of 3 choir psychers of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica to receive and decipher, their minds shattered by the whispers they had brushed against in the warp, their souls perhaps irretrievably tainted, was to investigate the Sable Drift, and more specifically, a phenomenon referred to in fragmented, terrified local legends as the Weeping Vein. Reports were scarce, unreliable, tinged with the superstitious dread common to voidfarers who plied these treacherous, ill-omened routes on the fringes of the Calixis sector. Men and women who saw daemons in every stellar flare and the Emperor's judgment in every comet. They spoke of ships vanishing without a trace, their last vox transmissions dissolving into screams, or worse, into a strange, sorrowful music that echoed in the dreams of those who heard it. They whispered of crews driven mad by whispers from the void, their minds unraveling like rotten tapestries, their sanity flayed away layer by layer, and they spoke with particular dread of a strange, dark liquid said to weep from the heart of a colossal vein-like asteroid formation deep within the drift. This ichor, as some called it, was rumored to have properties. Unsettling properties. The kind that pricked the interest of my Ordo like a thorn beneath a fingernail. A festering splinter that demanded investigation and, if necessary, purgation by holy fire and righteous fury. The Martyr's Lament, a vessel old even by the Imperium's standards, its hull scarred by centuries of thankless service and forgotten wars and silent purges across a dozen sectors, vibrated with a low, resonant hum that was subtly different from its usual warp-weary thrum. It was a disquieting resonance, as if the very structure of the ship, its ancient machine spirit, was responding to some unseen, unheard frequency emanating from the drift itself, a discordant note in the symphony of its engines, a vibration that set the fillings in one's teeth to aching. On the bridge, the air was thick with the familiar cocktail of recycled oxygen, the heavy cloying scent of sacred incense, burned by the ship's confessor to placate the ship's ancient and often cantankerous machine spirit, and the faint, ever-present metallic tang of human fear, a perfume I had grown accustomed to, the scent of my grim trade. Navigator Primus Thrace, your assessment. I addressed the robed figure hunched over his arcane charts and astrolabes in the shielded alcove of the navigator's station, a sanctum of flickering candlelight, strange astrological devices, and the faint, unsettling smell of ozone and burnt-out psychic potential. His third eye, the warp eye that was the mark of his mutated lineage, a sign of both his power and his ostracization from normal human society, usually a piercing sapphire that could gaze into the very heart of the immaterium and discern its treacherous currents, was clouded like milk glass, its gaze turned inward, or perhaps repulsed by what lay beyond the veil of real space in this blighted region. Thrace's voice when it came was a dry rasp, like stones grinding together in a forgotten tomb, each word an effort. Lord Inquisitor, the currents within this drift, they are an abomination. Unnatural, they do not flow with the predictable tides of the warp, they congeal like bad blood in a dying corpse. Augury is all but useless. The warp's echoes are distorted, twisted into mockeries of guidance, whispering lies and false promises, tempting the unwary with visions of salvation that lead only to damnation. Even the Astronomican's light, the God Emperor's divine beacon that guides humanity through the starless night, is a pale, guttering candle here, almost lost in the oppressive gloom, its song of hope a barely audible whisper, nearly drowned out by a chorus of something else. We navigate by dead reckoning, by the grace of the God Emperor alone, and by the fading memories of those few charts that mark this cursed place, charts drawn in blood and madness by those who came before and did not return. He made a warding gesture, his gnarled, ring-laden fingers trembling slightly, the ancient sign of the Aquila, a fragile ward against the encroaching darkness. There is a wrongness here, Inquisitor, a deep, ancient sickness that permeates the void itself, a sorrow so profound it stains the stars, a grief that has taken root in the very fabric of reality. My retinue, such as it was for this particular investigation, a scalpel rather than a bludgeon, stood assembled near the primary command throne, a collection of individuals as diverse and often as dangerous as the threats we faced. I preferred a smaller, more specialized team for initial reconnaissance, less likely to draw unwanted attention from whatever lurked in the shadows, more adaptable to unforeseen circumstances that the galaxy so readily, and often fatally, provided. There was Sister Verity, a former hospitaller of the Adeptus Sororitas, her once pristine white robes of healing, now the grim gray of an inquisitorial acolyte, a testament to a past she rarely spoke of, a tragedy that had led her from the cloisters of the Order's Hospitaller to my more shadowy service. Her medical skills were invaluable, her knowledge of anatomy, toxins, and biological contaminants extensive. But it was her unwavering faith, a core of adamantine belief in a universe determined to shatter it, that I valued most. Her face, framed by a severe black hood that cast her strong, compassionate features into shadow, was calm, her eyes watchful, her hand never far from the bolt pistol holstered at her hip, a weapon she wielded with a surgeon's precision and a zealot's conviction. She had seen too much suffering to be easily cowed, yet her capacity for empathy remained, a dangerous but sometimes necessary quality. Beside her stood Magos explorator Tiberius Kaine, a devotee of the cult Mechanicus, whose devotion to the Omnissiah, the machine god, was matched only by his unsettling, almost obsessive fascination with the forbidden and the alien. His augmented frame was a hulking silhouette of crimson robes, gleaming bionics, and a dozen writhing mechadendrites, each tipped with a different sensor, manipulator, or, I suspected, concealed weapon. His optical lenses, a cluster of multifaceted gems that replaced his human eyes, glowed with a predatory analytical light as he scanned the sensor readings from the Sable Drift, his internal cogitators already processing terabytes of conflicting data, searching for patterns in the chaos. He was here to analyze the weeping vein, to dissect its properties, to understand its origin, whether natural, xenos, or something else entirely, something that defied the neat categorizations of imperial dogma. His presence was a calculated risk. The Mechanicus's thirst for knowledge often trod a fine line with techno-heresy, and Kaine, I suspected, had crossed that line more than once in his long pursuit of enlightenment, his quest for the lost secrets of the dark age of technology. He saw the universe as a puzzle, and the Sable Drift was a particularly intriguing, if dangerous, new set of pieces. Finally, there was Jasker, a former hive scum from the deepest, most lightless sumps of Scintilla, the gleaming capital of the Calixis sector, a world whose glittering spires hid a rotten core of poverty and desperation. Now he was an inquisitorial operative of surprising skill and unnerving ruthlessness. his loyalty bought with coin and the promise of a slightly less brutal death than the one he would have undoubtedly found in the Underhive. His skills in stealth, infiltration, and acquisition, a euphemism for theft, assassination, and anything else the situation demanded, had been honed in the brutal Underhives where life was cheap and survival a daily miracle, a constant, bloody struggle. He was a wiry, shadow-thin man, his face a roadmap of old scars and older regrets, his eyes the color of muddy water, holding the perpetual weariness of one who has seen too much of humanity's darkness and found little to redeem it. He carried an arsenal of concealed blades, a silenced auto-pistol of exquisite craftsmanship, and a cynical disbelief in almost everything except the cold, hard reality of survival and the next promised payment. He was my eyes and ears in places where faith and firepower were insufficient, where a whisper in the dark or a knife in the back was more effective than a bolter shell. He trusted no one, not even me, but his skills were undeniable. Initial sensor sweeps confirmed the local legends, Lord Inquisitor. Magos Kaine's synthesized voice crackled, cutting through the bridge's low hum, his pronouncements always delivered with an air of detached certainty that brooked no argument. There is a significant asteroid formation deep within the drift, designated Objective Row 7 by preliminary astrogation charts recovered from a derelict Chartist freighter, the Starlight Wanderer, found on the edge of the drift centuries ago, its crew long dead, their bodies desiccated. Its mass is anomalous, far exceeding what its apparent composition of silicate rock and ferrous metals would suggest. There is a density variance that defies conventional physics, and I am detecting unusual energy signatures emanating from its core, fluctuating, organic in their complexity, yet with a resonance that is not entirely natural, a pattern that echoes certain forbidden Xenos biosignatures found in the Jericho Reach, and also, disturbingly, traces of corrupted warp energy. And yes, he paused, his optical lenses focusing intently on a flickering rune on his display, a complex waveform scrolling across his internal chronometer. There are indications of liquid exhalations, a periodic rhythmic weeping, as the legends describe. The cycle appears to be approximately every 7 Terran Standard hours, synchronized with a subtle gravitational pulse from within the asteroid itself. Organic energy signatures? Weeping asteroids? Corrupted warp energy? Sister Verity's voice was low, her brow furrowed in a mixture of disbelief and dawning apprehension. She made the sign of the Aquila reflexively. That is, contrary to the established laws of the Omnissiah's creation, is it not, Magos? A perversion of the natural order, a blasphemy against the Emperor's divine plan. Kaine's head, a skull-like amalgamation of polished chrome and pale, vat-grown flesh that showed no emotion, tilted in a gesture that might have been contemplative or merely a mechanical tick. The Omnissiah's creation is vast and filled with many things not yet catalogued by Marr's sister. Many secrets lie hidden in the dark places of the galaxy. Some phenomena merely await proper classification within the great database, their apparent strangeness a result of our own limited understanding. Others defy it, existing as paradoxes, as challenges to our understanding of the divine machine that is the universe, hints of truths perhaps best left unknown. There was a hint of something that might have been excitement, or perhaps a more sinister, covetous anticipation in his synthesized tone. This weeping vein promises to be illuminating. Perhaps it holds secrets from before the age of Imperium. The local Chartist vessels and itinerant prospectors that still brave this blighted region, mostly desperate fools or those with nothing left to lose, speak of it as a place of ill omen, Lord Inquisitor, Jasker added, his voice a low growl, his eyes, accustomed to the gloom of Underhives, fixed on the swirling darkness of the viewport with an almost predatory stillness, as if expecting something to leap out of the void. They call it the Grief Rock or the Star Sorrow. They say those who venture too close are changed, that their ships' machine spirits fail, that their gellar fields flicker and die, that the weeping isn't just liquid, but sorrow itself made manifest, a psychic contagion that seeps into the mind. They say it seeps into your soul, drowns you in a sea of unending despair until you become one of the lost, your ship a derelict, your spirit a mournful echo in the void. He spat onto the deck, a gesture of Underhive contempt for things he didn't understand but instinctively distrusted. Place sounds like a damn death trap. Sorrow made manifest. A poetic, if unsettling, notion. The kind of superstition that often hid a kernel of terrifying truth in these benighted corners of the galaxy, where the veil between realities was thin and the minds of men, starved of hope and beset by fear, were fertile ground for madness and the insidious whispers of the warp. "We will proceed to Objective Row 7 with all due caution, Navigator Thrace," I commanded, my voice cutting through the uneasy atmosphere on the bridge, a blade of cold resolve. "Magos Kaine, continue your analysis. I want to know the composition of this ichor, the nature of these energy signatures, the precise periodicity of its weeping, before we make planetfall, if such a term even applies to an asteroid of this nature. Sister Verity, prepare the Medicae Bay for potential contaminants, both physical and psychic. Jasker, ensure our armory is fully stocked and our lander's stealth systems are operational." My gaze swept over my retinue, my expression unreadable behind the impassive mask of my office, the rosette of the Holy Ordos glinting dully on my breast. "Prepare for potential hostile contact. The Sable Drift has a reputation for swallowing ships whole, for luring them to their doom with whispers and false promises. I do not intend for the Martyr's Lament to join its ghostly fleet of derelicts. Failure is not an option." The journey deeper into the Sable Drift was a descent into a suffocating silent hell, a slow crawl through a cosmic graveyard where the ghosts of forgotten tragedies whispered on the solar winds. The particulate miasma grew thicker, a choking fog of ancient dust and unknown stellar matter, reducing visibility to mere ship lengths, forcing the Martyr's Lament to navigate by short, cautious bursts of its plasma drives, its powerful augurs struggling to penetrate the oppressive gloom, their sensor returns often distorted into meaningless static, or worse, into fleeting, impossible images that flickered across the screens. Colossal, shadowy shapes that had no right to exist, impossible geometries that hurt the eyes, faces in the dust that seemed to scream in silent agony. The obsidian asteroids, some as large as moons, their surfaces scarred and pitted by eons of cosmic radiation and micrometeorite impacts. Others mere jagged shards that could tear through a ship's hull like ceramite razors, tumbled past in an unnerving silent ballet, their surfaces reflecting no light, seeming to absorb it, to draw it into their cold, dead hearts. Strange, fleeting sensor echoes ghosted at the edge of our detection range. Ships, perhaps, their forms distorted and indistinct, their transponders silent, derelicts lost to the drift's embrace, their crews long dead or worse, their hulls perhaps breached and their interiors home to things that thrived in vacuum and darkness. Or perhaps something else entirely. Something that hunted in the darkness. Something ancient and predatory that had made this blighted region its lair, its web. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of our own vessel. A silence that pressed in, that felt watchful, pregnant with an unseen, unspoken menace. The disquieting resonance that had thrummed through the ship upon entering the drift intensified, becoming a palpable vibration that seemed to settle in the bones, in the teeth, a low, mournful thrum that resonated with some primal, forgotten part of the human psyche, a frequency that induced unease and a creeping sense of dread. Crew members, even seasoned void hands who had faced down orc pirates in the lawless Coronis expanse and Eldar corsairs in the twilight realms of the Webway, complained of splitting headaches that no Medicae unguent could soothe. Of vivid, disturbing nightmares filled with images of drowning in black tears, of being lost in an endless lightless labyrinth, of a persistent, unshakable feeling of being watched by unseen, sorrowful eyes. The ship's chaplains, stern men of unwavering faith whose souls were supposedly armored in righteousness, redoubled their prayers, their voices hoarse from endless litanies of protection and purification. The scent of incense becoming cloyingly thick in the recycled air, a desperate attempt to ward off the encroaching spiritual malaise that seemed to seep through the very hull of the ship. Even the servitors, usually mindless automatons, their organic components lobotomized and enslaved to the will of the machine, their consciousness scoured clean of all but their designated tasks, began to exhibit strange, erratic behavior. Twitching uncontrollably, their limbs spasming, muttering fragmented binary code that seemed to form coherent if disturbing phrases in some forgotten techno-lingua, their optical sensors staring blankly into the oppressive darkness as if seeing things hidden from mortal eyes, things that gibbered and wept in the shadows. One maintenance servitor, its programming corrupted, was found attempting to carve strange weeping eye symbols into a bulkhead in the engineerium with a plasma torch before it was subdued by a nervous tech priest and summarily decommissioned, its organic components consigned to the reclaimers. The machine spirit of the Martyr's Lament itself seemed to suffer, its usual grumbling hum replaced by a mournful whine, its systems prone to inexplicable glitches and phantom power drains. Lord Inquisitor Magos Kaine reported, his voice cutting through the growing tension on the bridge, a beacon of cold logic in a sea of rising fear, though even his synthesized tones seemed to carry a new note of strain. I am detecting a significant increase in the organic energy signatures and a corresponding intensification of the psychic resonance. We are approaching Objective Row 7, and the weeping it has begun, precisely on the predicted cycle as if governed by some internal biological clock. My long-range spectrographic analyzers are picking up complex protein chains, amino acids, various enzymes, and something else. A neuroactive compound of unknown structure suspended in a saline solution. It is remarkably similar to Terran lacrimal fluid. Tears, Lord Inquisitor. On a colossal planetary scale. The asteroid is literally crying. The sheer volume is staggering. Tears, the weeping vein, the grief rock, the star sorrow. The legends were not mere superstition, not the fanciful ramblings of terrified voidfarers. They were a horrifying, literal truth, a cosmic anomaly that defied all known science and reason. Through a momentary parting in the swirling dust clouds, a rent in the fabric of the shroud like a lifted veil, we caught our first glimpse of Objective Row 7. It was not a single asteroid, but a colossal, elongated agglomeration of smaller, dark rocks, fused together in a way that defied natural formation, looking for all the galaxy like a vast, blackened, petrified vein, or perhaps the fossilized heart of some unimaginable, long-dead cosmic entity, a creature whose death throes had birthed this nebula of sorrow. It was miles long, miles thick, pulsing with a faint, sickly internal luminescence, a cancerous glow that emanated from deep within its core, a light that was not the light of stars but something colder, something more alive. And from fissures and cracks along its dark, pitted surface, a dark, viscous liquid, like black oil or corrupted blood, was indeed weeping, oozing out in slow, thick rivulets that caught the faint, ambient light of the drift with an oily sheen before freezing instantly in the void, forming strange, glittering icicles of sorrow, a macabre, crystalline efflorescence that coated vast swathes of its surface like a frozen shroud. The sight was both repellent and strangely terribly beautiful, a monument to some unimaginable cosmic grief, a testament to a sorrow so profound it had become a physical blight upon the universe. Magnificent and horrifying, Kaine breathed, his mechadendrites whirring with activity as he focused his array of sensors on the grotesque spectacle, his scientific curiosity overriding any sense of self-preservation, his desire to understand this abomination almost palpable. The energy readings are off the scale. It is not merely rock, Lord Inquisitor. There is something within, something vast, something alive, or at least possessing the complex energy patterns and metabolic processes of a living if utterly alien organism. The very rock seems to be tissue on a geological scale. Alive. An asteroid weeping tears, alive. This was beyond mere heresy. This was an abomination against the very laws of creation, a perversion of the Omnissiah's sacred designs, a cosmic blasphemy that demanded investigation and likely annihilation. "Prepare a landing party," I ordered, my voice colder than the void outside, my resolve hardening into a core of icy determination, the familiar weight of my inquisitorial duty settling upon me. "Magos Kaine, Sister Verity, Jasker, you are with me. We will descend to the surface of this vein. We will take samples. We will discover the source of this weeping. We will understand the nature of this grief. And if it is hostile, if it is heretical, if it poses a threat to the Imperium or the sanity of its citizens, we will see it cauterized." There was no room for doubt, no place for fear, only the cold, hard calculus of duty, the grim arithmetic of the Inquisition. The descent in the archaic, heavily armored lander, the St. Olaf's Fist, a relic from a forgotten crusade, its hull bearing the scars of battles fought in the Emperor's name long before I was born, its machine spirit as stubborn and resilient as the saint for whom it was named, was a nerve-wracking affair. The local gravitational distortions around the weeping vein were chaotic, unpredictable, throwing the small craft about like a child's toy in the hands of a malevolent god, its internal inertial dampeners struggling to compensate. The particulate miasma of the Sable Drift was so thick that visibility was zero. Our pilots, grim-faced men from the Schola Progenium, whose faith was as unyielding as their piloting skills, relying entirely on Kaine's often conflicting sensor readings and their own desperate prayers to the Emperor and the machine spirit of the lander. The hull of the St. Olaf's Fist groaned and creaked under unseen pressures, the adamantium plates flexing and protesting with sounds like tortured metal, and the strange, resonant hum of the drift seemed to penetrate even our sealed environment, a mournful, sobbing sound that vibrated in our very souls. A lament for all the lost and forgotten, a song of unending despair. We landed, or rather, made a controlled crash onto a relatively stable, flat section of the vein's dark, pitted surface. The landing struts screeching in protest as they absorbed the impact, sending shudders through the lander's frame. The material beneath our magnetized boots was not rock as we knew it, but a strange, porous, almost organic-feeling substance, cold and slightly yielding, like stepping onto a colossal petrified corpse, its surface slick with a thin film of the frozen ichor. The gravity was unnervingly light, perhaps only a tenth of standard Terran, our movements clumsy and exaggerated, each step a potential leap into the void, a disorienting sensation that added to the pervasive sense of wrongness. The air, or what passed for it within the thin, weeping atmosphere clinging to the vein like a shroud of sorrow, was a frigid, razor-thin soup of frozen gases, methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, and the ever-present, cloying scent of the dark ichor that oozed from the fissures around us. It smelled of salt, of metal, of decay, and of a profound, ancient grief that was almost a physical weight, pressing down on the spirit, a palpable miasma of despair that threatened to suffocate the soul. Our helmet lamps cut through the oppressive gloom, their powerful beams revealing a landscape of nightmarish desolation, a scene torn from a madman's vision of hell, or perhaps a glimpse into one of the darker corners of the warp made manifest. Jagged, obsidian-like crags, their surfaces slick and glistening with the weeping ichor that caught the light like polished jet, rose into the darkness like broken teeth, or the shattered bones of some colossal beast. Deep fissures, some glowing with a faint, sickly internal light, the same cancerous luminescence we had seen from orbit, crisscrossed the ground, their depths lost in shadow, promising only a fall into oblivion, into the weeping heart of this place. And everywhere, the silence. A silence that was not empty, but filled with a palpable, sorrowful presence, the accumulated grief of aeons, the silent screams of a million lost souls. Magos Kaine, begin your analysis, I ordered, my voice muffled by my rebreather, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden stillness that descended after the lander's engines powered down. Sister Verity, attend to the atmospheric samplers. Jasker, scout our immediate perimeter. I want no surprises. This place feels like a trap waiting to be sprung, a web woven from sorrow and despair. Kaine's mechadendrites were already at work, their metallic tendrils unfurling like curious serpents, drilling into the vein's surface with diamond-tipped augers, deploying an array of sophisticated sensors, collecting samples of the weeping ichor into sterile, glowing containment files. The composition is extraordinary, Lord Inquisitor, he reported, his synthesized voice filled with a mixture of scientific awe and barely suppressed revulsion. A conflict that was often present in the more inquisitive members of the Mechanicus. The rock itself is a complex carbon silicate matrix, interwoven with bioluminescent fungal hyphae, similar in structure to certain xenos organisms found in the halo stars, specifically the flensing algor, but on an unprecedented scale. This entire asteroid appears to be a colossal fungal organism, or perhaps a geode with a fungal core. And the ichor, it contains complex neurotransmitters, psychoactive compounds, and traces of DNA. Human DNA, Lord Inquisitor. Extensively degraded, mutated, fragmented, but undeniably human in origin, as if the vein is consuming and repurposing those who fall within its grasp. Human DNA in the tears of a weeping asteroid. The implications were horrifying. A cosmic charnel house, perhaps, absorbing the very essence of those lost to its embrace, their bodies and souls fuel for its unending sorrow. Or perhaps, something even more monstrous, a living tomb, a collective grave that wept for its unwilling inhabitants. Sister Verity, her face pale but resolute behind her visor, was tending to a portable atmospheric analyzer, its small cogitator whirring as it processed the data, its display flickering with complex chemical formulae. The airborne particulates. They are not inert, Lord Inquisitor, she said, her voice tight with a mixture of scientific concern and spiritual unease. They are microscopic organisms. Spores, perhaps, similar in structure to what Magos Kaine detected in the vein's composition. And they are psychoreactive. They seem to respond to emotional states. My own anxiety, the residual fear from the landing, it is causing them to cluster. She gestured with a gloved hand to a small shimmering cloud of dust that had coalesced around her, its particles glowing faintly with an unhealthy greenish light, like disturbed grave mold, a miniature nebula of despair. They are drawn to strong emotion, Lord Inquisitor. They feed on it, or perhaps they amplify it. Before I could respond to this deeply unsettling revelation, before I could fully process the implications of an environment that literally fed on our fear and sorrow, an environment that was itself a living weeping wound, Jasker's voice crackled over the comms, sharp and urgent, stripped of its usual cynical drawl, replaced by a note of genuine alarm. Lord Inquisitor, we are not alone. Movement, Sector Gamma 7, behind that large crystalline outcrop to port. Multiple contacts. And they are not friendly. They move like broken things, like puppets with their strings cut. We turned, our weapons raised, towards the sector Jasker had indicated. From the shadows of a jagged, ichor-slicked crag, figures were emerging, shambling out of the darkness like specters from a forgotten nightmare. They were humanoid but horribly changed, their forms emaciated, their skin the color of bruised flesh, stretched taut over elongated, twisted bones that seemed to protrude at unnatural angles. They wore the tattered remnants of void suits, Chartist crew uniforms, Imperial Navy fatigues, even the crimson robes of a lost Mechanicus explorator. Their plasteel armor cracked and broken, their helmets shattered or missing entirely, revealing faces that were frozen in rictuses of unending silent grief, their eyes hollow pits from which the same dark ichor that wept from the vein itself now streamed like an endless torrent of black tears, carving glistening trails down their desiccated cheeks. They moved with a slow, shambling gait, their movements jerky and unnatural, like puppets whose strings were tangled, their limbs bending at impossible angles as if their joints no longer functioned correctly. And they were all weeping. Weeping the black tears of the vein, their silent sorrow a palpable wave that rolled towards us, a psychic miasma of despair. The lost crews. Sister Verity whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of horror and profound pity, her hand instinctively going to the Aquila symbol on her chest, a prayer forming on her lips. The ships that vanished in the drift, this is what became of them. The Emperor's mercy. They have found none here, only this endless sorrow. These were the first of the Sorrowful, as the local legends sometimes called them, the damned souls of the Sable Drift, their bodies and spirits consumed and repurposed by the weeping vein. They carried no weapons, yet their very presence was a threat, their silent, weeping advance an unnerving spectacle that gnawed at the edges of sanity, their collective grief a tangible force. They shambled towards us, their black tears leaving glistening trails on the dark ground. Their hollow eyes fixed on us with a look of profound, unutterable despair, a despair that was almost contagious, a sorrow that sought to share its crushing burden. "Hold your fire," I commanded, though my own hand tightened on the grip of my Inferno pistol, its pilot light a small defiant spark in the oppressive gloom. They do not appear immediately hostile. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Perhaps some spark of their former selves remains, buried beneath the layers of grief. A foolish hope, perhaps, in this place of madness and despair, a sentimentality I could ill afford, but one I had to entertain before resorting to the Emperor's fiery judgment. My mandate was to investigate, not merely to destroy. Sometimes, even the damned could offer answers. As the first of the Sorrowful drew closer, a figure that might once have been a ship's officer, by the tattered, gold-braided remnants of its uniform, its rank insignia long since corroded into illegibility. It raised a trembling, emaciated hand, its fingers elongated and skeletal, dripping with the black ichor. Its lipless mouth opened, and a sound emerged, not a word, not a scream, but a low, mournful keen, a sound of such profound, soul-crushing grief that it felt like a physical blow, a wave of pure, unadulterated despair that washed over us, threatening to drown us in its sorrow, to extinguish the very will to live, to make us join their silent, weeping chorus. My own carefully constructed mental fortitude, the iron discipline honed by decades of service to the Inquisition, the psychic wards etched into my very soul by the Ordo's most skilled artisans, wavered. The silvery transformation that had begun on Vortis' shroud, a subtle alteration I had kept hidden even from my own retinue, a secret strength and a potential curse, pulsed beneath my skin, a cold, alien strength that seemed to offer a strange, detached clarity, a buffer against the overwhelming tide of emotion. It was as if a part of me was no longer entirely human, no longer susceptible to purely human frailties. But even that was not enough to completely shield me from the sheer, raw despair that radiated from these wretched creatures. A despair that was ancient, cosmic, and utterly infectious. It clawed at the edges of my mind, whispering of the futility of struggle, the sweetness of surrender to sorrow. Sister Verity cried out, clutching her head, her faith a fragile shield against the psychic onslaught of grief. Tears, not black like those of the sorrowful, but clear and human, streamed from her own eyes as she shared unwillingly in their ancient pain. Magos Kaine's bionics sparked, his systems struggling to process the overwhelming sensory input, his optical lenses flickering erratically as they tried to filter out the psychic noise. Jasker, ever the pragmatist, simply swore, a string of underhive curses that were surprisingly inventive, his hand going to his auto-pistol, his knuckles white, his face a mask of grim determination rather than despair. He had seen too much misery in his life to be easily broken by more of it, even on this cosmic scale. "They are broadcasting their sorrow, Lord Inquisitor," Kaine gasped, his voice distorted by static, his mechadendrites twitching as if in sympathy with the Sorrowful's jerky movements. "The ichor, the spores, they are a conduit for a collective consciousness of grief. This entire vein, it is a psychic amplifier, a monument to unending despair. Their sorrow is a weapon. It is designed to overwhelm, to assimilate." The Sorrowful were closer now, their black tears flowing freely, their mournful keen rising in pitch, becoming a chorus of unbearable, soul-shattering woe, a symphony of damnation that echoed across the desolate landscape. And as they advanced, their numbers swelling as more figures emerged from the shadows, from fissures in the ground, from behind the jagged crags, the very ground beneath our feet began to tremble, not with the resonant hum of the drift, but with a deeper, more violent vibration, as if something vast, something ancient, something that had slumbered for eons in the heart of the weeping vein, was beginning to stir, awakened by our presence, by our defiance of its sorrowful embrace. The air grew colder, the pressure more intense, the scent of ozone mixing with the cloying sweetness of the ichor. The unspoken pact of Vortis' shroud had been a prelude, a mere whisper of the horrors the galaxy could conceive. The weeping vein of Sable Drift was the symphony of despair itself, its notes the silent screams of a billion lost souls. And we, the insignificant motes of dust that dared to intrude upon its grief, were about to become its newest, most sorrowful notes. The true horror of this place was only just beginning to unveil itself, and I had a chilling premonition that the tears it wept were not just its own, but the tears of all who had ever been lost to the uncaring void. Their pain and sorrow distilled into this weeping wound in reality. The psychic assault intensified. It was not a direct mental attack, no insidious whispers or terrifying visions like those one might encounter from a creature of the warp, but a crushing wave of pure, unadulterated grief. So potent it felt as if the weight of every tragedy in the galaxy, every loss, every moment of despair, was pressing down upon us, seeking to break our spirits. Sister Verity was on her knees, her hands pressed to her temples, her body racked with sobs that were not her own, her faith a flickering candle against a hurricane of despair. Jasker, His face a mask of grim determination, was firing his auto-pistol. The silenced shots barely audible above the keening of the Sorrowful, but his solid slugs seemed to pass through the advancing figures with little effect, as if they were partially insubstantial. Ghosts made of solidified grief, their forms flickering and distorting. Their forms, they are not entirely physical, Lord Inquisitor. Kaine yelled, his voice strained, as he unleashed a burst of focused radiation from one of his mechadendrites, a tool normally used for sterilizing Xenos contaminants. The beam struck one of the Sorrowful, causing its form to shimmer and distort violently, like heat haze over a desert, its keening rising to a painful shriek, but it did not fall. It merely wept harder, its black tears flowing like rivers, its despair undiminished. They are psychically predicted manifestations, anchored by the ichor, by the spores. Conventional weaponry is inefficient. We are fighting sorrow itself. My own inferno pistol spat gouts of sanctified promethium. The blessed flames engulfed several of the advancing Sorrowful, and for a moment their keening turned into shrieks of what might have been pain, or perhaps merely a more intense form of their sorrow, their forms blackening and charring, the scent of burning ichor adding another foul note to the atmosphere. But even as they burned, their forms dissolving into greasy smoke and black dust, new figures emerged from the shadows to take their place, their numbers seemingly endless, their sorrow a suffocating tide that threatened to overwhelm us. The silvery transformation within me pulsed with a cold, alien energy. It was not grief I felt, not in the human sense, as my companions did. Instead, the overwhelming despair of the Sorrowful was filtered, analyzed, almost understood by the strange intelligence that now shared my being, a consequence of my encounter on Vortis Shroud. It was a cold, detached empathy, a recognition of a kindred, if debased, form of existence, a shared understanding of loss. Though mine was the loss of my pure humanity, theirs the loss of everything. And with that understanding came a strange, unsettling clarity. The Sorrowful were not attacking us out of malice, but out of a desperate, instinctual need to share their burden, to draw us into their collective grief, to make us part of their unending lament. They were psychic black holes, their sorrow so immense it threatened to consume everything around them, to add all consciousness to their chorus of woe. We cannot fight this with bullets and fire alone, I roared, my voice resonating with a power that was not entirely my own, the metallic timbre more pronounced now. We need to disrupt the source of their projection. Magos Kaine, the ichor, the spores. You said they were psycho-reactive. Can you neutralize them? Create a counter-frequency? Something to disrupt their psychic anchor. Theoretically possible, Lord Inquisitor, Kaine replied, his optical lenses flaring as he rapidly processed the data from his atmospheric samplers and ichor analysis, his mechadendrites already reconfiguring, small tools and emitters extending from their tips. The spores resonate at a specific psychic frequency, amplified by the ichor and the vein itself. If I can generate a harmonic dissonance, a counterwave, it might disrupt their cohesion, sever their connection to this place. But I would need to get closer to the primary weeping fissures where the concentration is highest, and I would need time to calibrate my equipment. Time we do not appear to have. As if on cue, the ground beneath us bucked violently. A deep, guttural groan, like the sound of a dying god drawing its last agonized breath, echoed from the depths of the wine. One of the larger fissures nearby, from which the black ichor had been slowly oozing, suddenly erupted with explosive force, spewing a geyser of the dark viscous liquid high into the thin atmosphere. The ichor rained down upon us, cold and slick, and where it touched bare skin or even our sealed armor, it burned with an icy fire, a fire that leached warmth and hope, leaving behind a numb, aching coldness. And from the erupting fissure, something else began to emerge. Not one of the emaciated, weeping Sorrowful, but something larger. Something ancient. Something formed not of flesh, but of the obsidian-like rock of the vein itself, animated by a malevolent, grieving intelligence. It was a golem of solidified sorrow, its form roughly humanoid but colossal, easily 3 times the height of an Astartes, its limbs thick and powerful, its surface glistening with weeping ichor. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were 2 burning pits of the same sickly internal luminescence that pulsed from the vein's core. It raised a massive, stony arm, and the keening of the Sorrowful intensified, becoming a weaponized shriek of pure despair that hammered at our minds, threatening to shatter our sanity. "That," Jasker said, his voice flat, his usual cynicism replaced by a grim resignation as he reloaded his auto-pistol with trembling hands, "is new. And I don't like it one bit. Looks like the welcoming committee just got upgraded." The Stone Lamenter, as I mentally dubbed it, took a ponderous step forward, the ground shaking with its every movement, sending tremors through our very bones. The Sorrowful parted before it, their keening a herald of its approach, a choir of despair accompanying their monstrous champion. This was not merely a psychic projection. This was a physical manifestation of the Vane's ancient, slumbering grief, a guardian of its sorrowful heart, a sentinel carved from millennia of accumulated pain. "Sister Verity," I yelled, my mind racing, searching for any weakness, any advantage in this desperate situation. "Your faith, can you project it? Can you create a beacon of hope against this despair? Something to counter its influence, to shield us from this spiritual onslaught?" It was a desperate gamble, asking a hospitaller to become a psychic shield, but the sister's faith was a tangible thing, a force in its own right, and in the face of such overwhelming despair, even a flicker of hope could be a weapon. Verity, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes now burning with a renewed fierce light, a zealot's fire I had not seen in her since her days with the Order's militant, nodded. She rose to her feet, her bolt pistol discarded, and instead she raised the simple, unadorned wooden aquila she wore around her neck, a relic from her convent. Clutched tightly in her gauntleted hand, she began to chant, not a litany of battle, not a prayer for vengeance, but a prayer of solace, a hymn of hope, her voice, though trembling at first, growing stronger, clearer, purer with every word, cutting through the cacophony of grief like a blade of light. It was a song of defiance, a song of faith in a universe that seemed determined to crush both. A faint, golden light began to emanate from her, from the aquila, pushing back against the oppressive darkness, against the crushing weight of despair. It was a small light, a fragile light, but in this place of unending sorrow, it shone like a defiant star, a beacon of warmth in the frigid darkness. The effect on the Sorrowful was immediate and startling. Some of them recoiled as if burned, their keening faltering, their hollow eyes blinking as if seeing light for the first time in centuries. A few even stumbled and fell, their forms flickering and dissolving into black dust. Others, however, seemed drawn to it, their shambling gait becoming more purposeful, their emaciated hands reaching out, not in aggression, but in a desperate, yearning plea for release, for an end to their torment. For a moment, it seemed as if Sister Verity's faith might actually turn the tide. But the Stone Lamenter was unmoved, its stony gaze fixed upon us, its grief too ancient, too profound, to be swayed by a mere flicker of human hope. It raised its other massive arm, and from its stony palm, a torrent of the black, weeping ichor shot forth, not as a liquid this time, but as a spray of razor-sharp solidified shards, each one a sliver of frozen despair, each one carrying a payload of concentrated psychic misery. "Incoming!" Jasker yelled, diving for cover behind a jagged outcrop of rock, his warning almost too late. The shards of solidified despair rained down upon us, a storm of black ice and sorrow. I raised my arm, the silvery carapace that now sheathed it, deflecting several of the projectiles with sharp metallic clangs, but others struck true, piercing armor, finding flesh. The pain was intense, not just physical, but spiritual, a cold, gnawing despair that seeped into the wounds, threatening to extinguish the will to fight. Sister Verity cried out as a shard grazed her cheek, drawing blood, her golden aura flickering violently. Magos Kaine's energy shield flared and died as it absorbed a volley of the projectiles, several of his mechadendrites sparking and going limp. The battle for the Weeping Vein had just escalated. We were no longer just fighting the ghosts of lost souls, the echoes of past tragedies. We were fighting the very essence of sorrow itself, an ancient cosmic grief given form and fury, a sentient despair that sought to drown the galaxy in its tears. And as the Stone Lamenter advanced, its stony fists raised to crush us, I knew that our chances of survival, let alone victory, were dwindling with every passing moment. The vein that wept in Sable Drift was determined to claim us, to add our tears to its endless, sorrowful flood, to make us part of its eternal lament. Our only hope lay in reaching the heart of this darkness, in confronting the source of this ancient grief, and either silencing it or being consumed by it entirely. The silvery coldness within me pulsed, a silent promise of power, of survival, but at what cost? The answer, I feared, lay deeper within the weeping wounds of this cursed asteroid, in the silent, sorrowful heart of the vein. The Stone Lamenter's advance was ponderous, but terrifyingly inexorable. Each step shook the very ground we stood on, dislodging loose rocks and sending tremors through our bones. Its obsidian-like fists, larger than a man, rose and fell with crushing force, shattering the already fractured surface of the vein, sending plumes of black dust and frozen ichor into the thin atmosphere. Jasker, with the agility of a cornered underhive rat, danced around its blows, his silenced autopistol spitting futile rounds that sparked harmlessly against its stony hide. He was buying time, drawing its attention, but it was a deadly game of cat and mouse. "Kaine, its structure!" I yelled over the din, parrying a sweeping blow from one of the lesser Sorrowful that had managed to get past Sister Verity's wavering aura of faith. My power sword Veritas bit deep into its emaciated form, and it dissolved with a final, sighing keen. Is it solid? Are there weak points? Some resonant frequency we can exploit? The Magos, sheltering behind the bulk of our lander, its hull already dented and scarred from the ichor shard volley, was frantically working with his remaining functional mechadendrites, his optical lenses glowing with intense concentration as he analyzed the data streaming from his active sensors. Its composition is unique, Lord Inquisitor, not true stone, but a form of psycho-reactive crystal, solidified by concentrated psychic energy, the grief itself. It has no internal organs, no conventional vulnerabilities. However, his synthesized voice took on a note of cautious optimism. I am detecting stress fractures, microfissures within its crystalline lattice, particularly around the joints and the heart region where its internal luminescence is brightest. If we can concentrate enough kinetic force or a disruptive energy pattern on those points. Kinetic force it is. I gritted my teeth, the silvery carapace on my arm hardening, its surface temperature dropping perceptibly. The transformation was still progressing, still a mystery to me, but in this moment, its enhancements were welcome. Jasker, keep it distracted. Sister Verity, maintain your light. It is weakening the lesser ones. Kaine, direct my fire. I charged the Stone Lamenter. Veritas held high, its ancient energies thrumming in sympathy with my own altered state. The Colossus turned its burning gaze upon me, its stony features contorting into what might have been a rictus of rage, or perhaps an even deeper despair. It brought down a fist the size of an altar, aimed directly at me. I sidestepped, the blow shattering the ground where I had stood, the shockwave nearly throwing me from my feet. The air filled with the stench of pulverized rock and the cloying sweetness of the ichor. Target the left knee joint, Lord Inquisitor. Kaine's voice crackled in my helm. A pre-existing fracture line. A sustained impact should shatter it. I focused, the world narrowing to the glowing green lines of the fracture Kaine had indicated, now highlighted on my tactical heads-up display. The Stone Lamenter was raising its other fist. I had one chance. I channeled the cold alien energy that now flowed within me, the power of Vortis Shroud's unintended gift, into Veritas. The blade glowed with an intense silver-blue light, its disruptive field crackling with barely contained power. With a roar that was more beast than man, I lunged, bringing the sword down in a two-handed blow directly onto the indicated stress point. There was a sound like a mountain cracking, a high-pitched shriek of tortured crystal, and the Stone Lamenter's left leg buckled, shattering into 1,000 glittering black shards. The Colossus roared in what could only be agony, its form flickering, its internal light dimming for a moment. It stumbled, its balance lost, and crashed to one knee with a ground-shaking impact, sending a fresh wave of sorrowful scattering. Direct hit, Kaine exulted. Its structural integrity is compromised. Now the chest cavity, the source of its luminescence. That is its anchor point to this reality. But the Stone Lamenter was not yet defeated. With a roar of pure, concentrated grief, it slammed its remaining fist into the ground, sending a shockwave of black energy and solidified ichor shards radiating outwards. Jasker, caught too close, cried out as he was thrown against a rock face, his autopistol flying from his grip. Sister Verity's golden aura sputtered and died, her concentration broken, and she collapsed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The Sorrowful, no longer held back by her light, surged forward, their keening reaching a fever pitch. We were surrounded, outnumbered, our small beacon of hope extinguished. The Stone Lamenter, though crippled, was already struggling to rise, its shattered leg reforming from the ambient dust and ichor, its eyes burning with a renewed, hateful intensity. It was in that moment of seeming hopelessness, as the black tide of despair threatened to overwhelm us, that the unexpected happened. A new sound cut through the keening of the Sorrowful, a sound that did not belong in this place of grief and silence. It was the roar of powerful, well-maintained plasma engines, the distinctive thrum of an Imperial Valkyrie assault carrier. From the swirling, particulate gloom above, a gunship descended, its hull painted in the stark black and crimson of an Ordo Malleus strike force. Its heavy bolters and multi-lasers opened fire, not on us, but on the surrounding Sorrowful, tearing through their semi-ethereal forms with contemptuous ease, their blessed ammunition leaving trails of burning incense and righteous fury. Figures in bulky, archaic power armor, their forms adorned with purity seals and the stark, unyielding iconography of the Daemon Hunters, rappelled from the Valkyrie's open assault ramp, their storm bolters already spitting explosive rounds. Inquisitor Marr, a voice, amplified by a vox grill, boomed across the desolate landscape, a voice that radiated an iron will and an unshakable faith. By the authority of the Conclave of Tears, your unauthorized incursion into this prescribed zone is hereby noted. Reinforcements have arrived. Stand down and prepare for extraction. The Grey Knights are here to cleanse this stain. Grey Knights. The legendary, silver-armored Daemon Hunters of the Ordo Malleus, the Imperium's ultimate sanction against the horrors of the warp. Their presence here, in this remote, forgotten corner of the galaxy, was as unexpected as it was, perhaps, providential. Or perhaps, it was merely another complication in a situation already spiraling out of control. The lead Grey Knight, a towering figure whose Terminator armor was inscribed with countless litanies of warding, his eyes burning with a cold, psychic fire behind the visor of his helmet, advanced towards the still-struggling Stone Lamenter. He carried no conventional weapon, but his hands crackled with raw Empyrean energy. With a single, shouted word of power, a word that seemed to shake the very foundations of the weeping vein, he unleashed a torrent of pure white psychic flame that engulfed the Stone Lamenter. The Golem of Sorrow shrieked, a sound that was both physical and psychic, its crystalline form cracking and melting under the assault of the Grey Knight's sanctified power. Its internal luminescence flared nova bright, then extinguished, and with a final, shuddering groan, it collapsed, dissolving into a pile of black dust and rapidly evaporating ichor. The psychic pressure over the immediate area lessened significantly, the keening of the remaining Sorrowful fading into whimpers of confusion and fear. The Grey Knights moved with brutal, terrifying efficiency, their storm bolters and nemesis force weapons scything through the remaining Sorrowful, their every movement a testament to centuries of training and unwavering devotion. Within moments, the immediate threat was neutralized, the battlefield silenced, save for the crackle of residual psychic energy and the low hum of the Valkyrie's engines. The lead Grey Knight, his psychic flames now subsided, turned his impassive silver helm towards me. "Inquisitor Marr," he repeated, his voice devoid of inflection. "You have trod unwisely. This place is a nexus of profound psychic corruption, a wound that weeps the sorrows of a dead god. It is not a matter for the Ordo Hereticus alone." "Brother Captain Valerius," I replied, recognizing the voice, if not the face, from ancient sealed inquisitorial archives. Valerius of Titan, a name whispered with awe and fear, a hero of a dozen forgotten crusades against the archenemy. My own name, Silas, felt insignificant in his presence. "Your arrival is timely, though unexpected." I gestured towards my battered retinue. "We were engaged in preliminary reconnaissance, as per my mandate." "Your reconnaissance has awakened that which should have slept for another eternity, Inquisitor," Valerius stated, his tone uncompromising. "The psychic disturbance caused by your actions, by the activation of that golem, has been felt across the sector. It has drawn unwanted attention." He gestured vaguely towards the swirling darkness of the Sable Drift. "Things stir in the deep void, Marr. things that feed on such despair. Before I could press him further, Magos Kaine, who had been frantically working at his data slate, cried out, "Lord Inquisitor, Brother Captain, the energy readings from the veins core, they are spiking. The destruction of the Stone Lamenter, it has triggered something, a feedback loop. The entire asteroid, it is becoming unstable. It is going to self-destruct." As if to punctuate his words, the weeping vein shuddered violently, not with the rhythmic pulse of its weeping, but with a series of deep, internal convulsions, like a dying beast in its death throes. New fissures snaked across its surface, spewing geysers of black ichor and superheated steam. The sickly internal luminescence flared, turning the perpetual twilight into a hellish, strobing nightmare. "Evacuate," Valerius boomed, his voice cutting through the rising chaos. "All units, back to the Valkyrie. Inquisitor Marr, your team as well. This entire celestial body is about to become a gravestone." The retreat to the Valkyrie was a frantic scramble, the ground beneath our feet literally breaking apart, chasms opening to reveal the glowing, molten heart of the weeping vein. The Grey Knights, with their disciplined efficiency, formed a rear guard, their storm bolters laying down a curtain of fire against shadowy, half-seen things that now seemed to be clawing their way out of the rupturing asteroid, creatures of nightmare and solidified sorrow. We bundled the still comatose Sister Verity and the now almost entirely crystalline form of Jasker, who had been struck by a larger ichor shard during the Lamenter fight and was rapidly succumbing to a similar, though less refined, transformation as Eisen had on Vorda's shroud, into the Valkyrie. Magos Kaine, dragging his precious data slates and sample containers with him. I was the last to board, turning to look back at the weeping vein one final time. It was tearing itself apart, a colossal, cosmic wound bleeding black tears and fire into the void. And as it died, I felt a profound, unutterable sense of release, as if a great weight had been lifted from the entire sector. But I also felt a strange, cold emptiness, a sense of loss. The silvery transformation within me, the gift and curse of Vorda's shroud, resonated with the vein's dying agony, a shared understanding of a sorrow too vast for any single soul to bear. The Valkyrie's engines roared, pulling us away from the cataclysm. From the safety of its troop bay, we watched as the weeping vein finally exploded, not in a single clean blast, but in a slow, agonizing implosion, its constituent parts collapsing inwards, its sickly light extinguished, its sorrowful song silenced at last. The Sable Drift, though still a place of darkness and ill omen, felt lighter, cleaner, as if a great poison had been purged from its heart. Brother Captain Valerius stood beside me, his silver armor reflecting the distant, dying light of the vein. "It is done, Inquisitor Marr," he said, his voice quiet now, almost reflective. "The source of the psychic contagion has been cauterized. The weeping vein will weep no more." "But what was it, Brother Captain?" I asked, the question that had driven me to this cursed place still burning in my mind. What ancient grief did we disturb? Valerius was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the dissipating dust cloud where the vein had once been. "Some sorrows are best left undisturbed, Inquisitor," he said finally. "Some doors best left unopened." This was a tomb, a prison for a grief that predates humanity, perhaps even the rise of the Eldar. A sorrow born of a cosmic betrayal, a love lost, a hope extinguished on a galactic scale. Its nature is beyond our comprehension, its power too vast to be safely understood. We have merely lanced a boil. The infection, the underlying despair that permeates this galaxy, remains. He turned to me, his eyes visible now behind his raised visor, ancient and filled with a profound weariness. "Your actions here were unorthodox, Inquisitor Marr. Reckless, even. But perhaps in this instance necessary. The Conclave will hear my report. You and your surviving retinue will be debriefed." The unspoken threat hung in the air. My surviving retinue. Magos Kaine? Already absorbed in analyzing the data he had salvaged, his mechadendrites clicking softly. Jasker, a silent, crystalline statue, his fate as uncertain as Eisen's before him. Sister Verity, still unconscious, her face pale, her spirit, I hoped, unscarred by the horrors she had witnessed, her faith perhaps even strengthened by the trial. And myself, Silas Marr, Inquisitor, transformed, forever touched by the alien logic of Vorda's shroud, by the cosmic sorrow of the weeping vein. My path forward was uncertain. Would the Ordos accept what I had become? Or would they see me as tainted, a heretic in my own right? The Valkyrie docked with the Martyr's Lament, which had held its position on the edge of the Sable Drift, a silent, scarred sentinel. As I prepared to disembark, Brother Captain Valerius placed a heavy, gauntleted hand on my shoulder. "The galaxy is a tapestry of sorrow, Inquisitor Marr," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Some threads are best left unpulled, but when they are, it takes souls of uncommon strength, or perhaps uncommon desperation, to weave them back into some semblance of order, or to cut them free entirely." He paused. "You have done what was necessary. For now. But be warned. The Sable Drift still holds many secrets, many sorrows, and the things that feed on despair are always hungry." My final report to the Ordo Hereticus and to the Ordo Malleus was a carefully crafted document, detailing the destruction of a major psychic Xenos artifact, the neutralization of a significant threat to voidfarers in the Calixus sector, and the regrettable but necessary losses sustained by my retinue. I omitted the full extent of my own transformation, the true nature of the cosmic grief we had encountered, and the unsettling resonance I now felt with the darker, more sorrowful currents of the galaxy. Some truths were burdens best borne alone. The Martyr's Lament turned its prow away from the Sable Drift, leaving behind a patch of void that was now marginally less haunted, marginally less sorrowful. The weeping vein was no more. Its tears were silenced, but the grief it represented, the ancient cosmic despair that festered in the dark places of the universe, remained. And I, Silas Marr, forever changed, forever marked by my journey into that heart of sorrow, would continue my vigil, a silver-skinned hunter in a galaxy drowning in its own tears. The vein in Sable Drift had ceased its weeping, but the scars it left on my soul, and on the fabric of reality, would endure. This particular horror was ended, its immediate threat contained, its story concluded. But in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the symphony of sorrow never truly ends. It merely pauses, waiting for the next movement, the next lost soul to add its voice to the chorus. And I would be listening.